Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politically Depressed podcast. I'm your host, Eamon McAdam, and today we've got a returning guest, Nada Homsi.
Hi, I'm also politically depressed.
Yes. The last time we talked was 2 years ago, which is wild because a lot has happened since. Nada's a journalist. She's a good friend of mine. We met each other 8 years ago in Beirut at a party. I remember I heard you talking about Seinfeld, and at the time I was still very much so influenced by George Costanza. And I was like, I want to talk to this girl.
Yeah.
Anyway, Nada's been covering the war in Lebanon, this most recent escalation of the war, but also since 2023. And I don't know, I've seen a lot of her reports, like videos that you've been publishing, and I just wanted to sit down and talk with her and share this conversation with all of you to give like an overview of the situation from someone on the ground, but also just, this is politically depressed and like try to get a bit more into that like experience of like not just being in Lebanon, but also doing quite dangerous work in the south of Lebanon, where the Israelis have targeted journalists. I think at the moment the number's at like 14 journalists killed in Lebanon by Israeli strikes. So before we get into any of that, hi Nada.
Hello.
I'm going to ask you the very first question I ask all the guests on this podcast, which is, how are you doing?
I am pretty good, all things considered. Yeah. I'm not someone that is a feelings dweller, so
Yeah.
I'm good day by day.
I remember that was your answer last time as well, and compared to all the other guests I was having at the time, I was like taken aback.
Really?
Yeah, because that usually like segues into the whole conversation where it's like, how am I doing? Such a complicated question. What is mental health and whatever.
Oh yeah, I just provided no segue whatsoever.
No. Um, but I mean, you did start by saying you're politically depressed, so that's something.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
obviously, there's like you can be doing okay in this situation, but the situation is horrendous.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, let me expand. I am fine, but everything obviously is day by day. I'm someone that's very practical. If there's a problem, I fix it. If there's something that needs to be done, I do it. So during this war, on March 2nd, first of all, I think I shared in everyone's shock and surprised when Hezbollah's rockets had really, in fact, like when we had verified that they just really had happened. And they went into Israel and we were just waiting for the response. And there was this feeling in my bones of like, oh, fuck, well, not this again. We've already been here. We've already done this. I don't have it in me to do it all over again. I'm sure the people that were displaced the first time around also didn't have it in them to be displaced all over again. So I think there was just a feeling of exhaustion. But during the last war, I was pregnant. During this war, I had a baby. Um, so childcare was a huge issue. The daycares were closed. I couldn't put her anywhere. I had to put her with my in-laws up in Shweifat, which is above Dahi, which means that my husband was driving from Hamra to above, like to through basically Dahi, around Dahi up to Shweifat every day, which was already a dangerous drive, but it was the only childcare that I could find for her. So that was something that I was really worried about in the early days. And also up until April 8th, there were strikes that were happening in Dahiya and also in Beirut. So I had started to concoct this plan in my head of if the airport closes, what am I going to do with Janine? What am I going to do with her? That's all I was thinking about, really. And I just had concocted this plan of, okay, I can meet my mom in Greece, so I don't have to put her through all of the different airstrikes that were happening, because
hmm.
obviously it was also the Iran-US war over our heads as well. So I was like, I'll meet my mom in Greece, I'll give her Janine, she'll take her to America. So I had that also like in the back of my head. But besides that, I really, really had to force myself to, in the first hour and day, forget everything that happened in 2023 or just forget the exhaustion of having covered 2023, 2024.
Yeah.
Because, okay, it was happening again. We've been there, we've done that. It's in many ways all of the same stories, but the suffering is still real. The stuff on the that's happening on the ground is still real. And as we know, like Israel ma btirham, there's no mercy when it comes to what it wants to do. And I think everyone knew that this time around, the villages that would be abandoned. If they were abandoned, there would be no coming back. So this was the war that mattered more than any other wars, and it was really important to document it.
Yeah. And you've been doing a really good job of doing that. Um, that
Thanks.
initial moment, I remember it very well, and everyone I was talking to said like, okay, yeah, this is going to be different, and this is going to be like the real one. Um, but it's also so difficult because yeah, like you said, you don't want to get fall into the trap of like this is perpetual or this is like, how do I say it? It's almost like it's always happening,
Hmm.
or like it always has been happening. And because it does feel very repetitive, I mean, it's the same displacement, it's the same towns and cities and villages, and it's the same airstrikes, and but it is different. It is unique. It is still like the suffering is still unique, and now obviously it is a different situation where it's like it's now what has it been 60 days? March 2nd, April, May, June, about 65 days, and yeah, you still have a lot of people displaced, over 1 million people, and like and that they have this yellow line and all this bullshit of these like ceasefire. Sorry,
It's only 60 days. It feels like a million years.
March
Feels like
2nd. So like
three
March,
months, 4 months, 60
it
days?
might be 3 months. It might be 90 days.
Yeah,
So
90
like
days.
in March, April, May. Yeah, 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 yeah. Sorry, I missed May. God,
Okay.
but like time also.
Yeah, yeah, I know. What is time?
Yeah,
Because 2 months is an eternity, three
yeah.
months is an eternity, and also it's nothing.
And then
So,
it kind of all stops all of a sudden, but then it doesn't stop, and we're in this amorphous situation where, you know, everyone's waiting in Beirut to find out what's happening, but people in the south aren't waiting to see what's happening like it's happening. Like in effect, there is no ceasefire at all
mhm.
in the south. Um, so I guess I don't know. I'd be curious to hear a little bit. Um, yeah, what it was like reporting in the south. I was watching like everything you were putting out, and obviously, I don't know how it feels like. I'm sure you hear this from your parents a lot. But, like I was very worried, seeing you in the south, seeing, knowing that like the Israelis have killed journalists in the south, that they deem journalism as like a dangerous thing, exposing and showing what they're doing. Um, but yeah, you were there a lot, um, filming and reporting.
Yeah, and we'll still keep going there for as much as we can. Although, of course, there's some places that I think are almost or that are impossible to go to now. Um, I think my priority the whole time was, I mean, I was just thinking in my head the whole time that if I die, my mom is going to be really mad.
Yeah.
I didn't want her to get, I didn't want her to get mad. But no, I think it's a really good thing. Not a good thing. We had good experience from covering the 2023-2024 war. We knew what to expect, so we kind of knew also how to plan out our stories. It starts off with displacement, you cover the displacement, and then you kind of go out from there. We knew that Israel was going to start striking areas that were outside of traditional Shia areas slash Hezbollah control, quote unquote, and that they were going to be stirring sectarian tension, sectarian strife. We could tell that this time around it was going to go even further than that, and there were going to be kinds of attempts to create very much like a civil kind of strife. Um, yeah, and patterns emerge when there's a war. So we could see that paramedics were being targeted. We could see which areas they were going hard on. One thing that this time was really interesting to us was that the Israeli army started calling villages that were not Shia villages. They started calling around Sunni Christian villages and saying, you guys can stay,
Mm.
but we know you have displaced people. And we're telling you that if you have any Hezbollah elements or anyone helping Hezbollah in your village, we're going to hit your village. And we know you have displaced
Mm.
people. So they didn't outright say, kick out all of the displaced people, but implied strongly, kick out all of the displaced people.
I remember
Um,
this, and some of the villages also are Druze villages, which exist in the south.
mhm.
And yeah, it does definitely contribute to this strategy that we're seeing of trying to foment civil strife. The same with a lot of the airstrikes that are happening in Beirut, where it was like, or then there was this one that happened in Ain Saad, just outside of Beirut, which is a predominantly Christian village.
Mhm.
Very quickly, and in the sort of like Christian sectarian media, They were blaming there must have been an Iranian guy here or a Hezbollah guy. I remember this one woman being interviewed said, like, we saw this guy dressed in black leaving on a moped just before the airstrike happened, implying he was Shia because he's wearing black or an operative. He was a delivery guy.
Hmm.
And the person that the Israelis ended up killing was a Christian politician. Um, but yeah, there is also just that thing. Sorry, not to interrupt, but like, or to like sideline the conversation, but like it's the same. It's just that I've been describing the situation as an ethnic cleansing, predominantly specifically of Shia, Lebanese in the south, and it's just like I just wrote a thing today because it's the thing we saw in Gaza, that like leave this area. Anyone who is in this area after we announce this, we assume is Hamas, and therefore everybody, is a legitimate target. And they're doing the same in the south, where it's just basically conflating Hezbollah and the entire Shia community. And not saying it's always legitimate and whatever, but like as in the goal of ethnic cleansing, and then making people worried about, yeah, being around Shia people. And we're also seeing then the displacement camps in Beirut, the antagonism against them, which is just
Yeah.
very frustrating.
No, I think it very much is ethnic cleansing. I feel very comfortable using that word. I mean, it's the persecution of Shiites, well, Shiites. It's the persecution of Shia. It is the absolute and wanton destruction of the South, ensuring that residents can't go back even if they wanted to. You have the full erasure of villages. I mean, I talk to people that are in displacement centers that tell me, like, for example, I was talking to a guy in Hasbaya who was staying in a displacement center there and it's on a mountain. And he goes to the vantage point every single day. And on a clear day, he can see Khiyam, that's his village. And he watches it get destroyed every single day. It's being erased.
Yeah,
Now, Oud has been erased. Countless villages have just ceased to exist. So even if return was an option, it wouldn't be possible. So I think those things combined, I think it's a pretty safe thing to say, ethnic cleansing. We're actually working on a story right now, so I don't want to get too much into it. But basically, speaking with legal experts and putting a bunch of reporting together on how essentially it is construed or could be construed as ethnic cleansing. In my
yeah,
opinion, it is, but in journalism speak, it may
yeah,
amount
yeah.
to
It may
cleansing.
amount to.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, so going back to your experience in the South, because there's something that I've seen in a couple of the video reports that you've put out that like you go, you leave, you come back, and more people have been killed, specifically civil defense people. And so you find yourself in quite a few funerals. Like, what's it? I don't even know how to pose this question, but like, what is that like being, surrounded by this grief and like reporting on it, but also partaking in it because, you're not some foreign journalist who's coming and like has this like objective distance.
It's weird, Ayman. So all the paramedic work we did, pretty much all of it was in Nabatea district, which is really dangerous, even though it's north of the Litani. It's where a lot of clashes are concentrated, especially now with the Israeli army trying to circle around Nabatea and eventually take it. But we have never once, ever gone to Nabatea with the intent of covering a paramedic's funeral
Yeah.
or something related to paramedics being targeted. The very first time that we went, it was because we wanted to embed with the civil defense. We went 4 times, maybe more. Not a single time did we actually get to embed with the civil defense.
Mm.
The first time that we went, we ended up going to a funeral. The second time we went, we ended up going to a funeral. The third time, the last time I went, it was for the funeral of the civil defense, Hussein Jabir, um, who was a paramedic that we saw every time that we went there, that we worked closely with, that was always working. Every journalist knows him. He was the civil defense guy that always was very helpful, helping and give us and with providing information, connecting us with other people. Yeah, and he was killed very close to the civil defense headquarters when he was providing treatment, him and his colleague, to a guy that had basically come hobbling towards the center after Israel struck his tuk-tuk. So not a single time did we go with the intent of covering funerals, except for the last time with Hussein Jabir and his colleague Ahmed Noura. And it wasn't even about their funeral, it was about kind of looking, trying to piece together forensically how it was that they were killed so that we can put it together. We ended up doing an investigation. We went so many times and ended up covering stuff that has to do with paramedics being targeted accidentally. We accidentally covered this every time, but we ended up getting so much reporting on it that we ended up doing an investigation on it.
No, yeah, that's all honestly really difficult to hear. And it's very difficult to watch and to because it's very clear when you look a bit closer, and especially in some of the reports you've been publishing, the systematic dismantling of healthcare in the South, of relief work, of medical work, that like when we see these double tap, triple tap, sometimes quadruple tap strikes, these are like very targeted, repeated strikes on the same target. Um, and that there's been a disproportionate number of medical workers killed, um, indicating, yeah, that this is, and again, this is part of the ethnic cleansing. You kill the people who can take care of and can heal the injured, which just multiplies those that like succumb to their injuries. It's really painful to watch, and so I can't imagine like actually having that like really up close, knowing the people themselves. And some of the reporting you've been doing, actually, I just really appreciate how humanizing it is. I remember this one where you're with them cooking a meal in this bombed out house that they're using as like a makeshift meeting point. It grounds it all much more, yeah, in a certain reality.
Yeah, I mean, they see it as their duty to stay and continue helping people that were in Nabati. And the fucked up thing is that I'm pretty sure, according to what they've told me, there are no more civilians, no more civilian residents left in Nabati, not even the city. There's
In
no
the
one
city,
left.
really,
Yeah,
it's a pretty big city in the south.
yeah, it's been
Like
empty.
what? Jesus. I mean, this was a couple of weeks ago they issued this evacuation order for the entirety of Nabatea.
Yeah, and they've been doing it ever since. But there's some areas, there's some like villages surrounding Nabatea where there are still people that are holding out, that are trying to hold on to their homes. So the hospital is still open in Nabatea to receive services, and obviously there's fighting as well. So the hospitals are open to just whoever is injured and in need of help.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's also just been, I don't know, again, just to go back to the point of like, um, surreal seeing you report in the South, and especially having seen, I mean, the Israelis have killed several journalists, and there's one that, it was filmed, we saw it, and we saw it with this British guy, Todd Sweeney.
Mm.
But then, of course, Amal Khalil, seeing how that all went down, how they chased her, you know, and how then there are these details that I just don't think a lot of people know, like when we say that the Israelis killed journalists, because I think especially this is how the Israeli propaganda functions, where there's a fog of war and it's just like faulty targeting or like a mistake or collateral damage, or then they try to revise and be like, oh, she was Hezbollah or something. But this like kept us all on the edge of our seats the entire day it was happening. That first we got the report that she and another journalist or two other journalists were struck, like hidden in a building, like found shelter in a building. Um, then and sort of like we're calling, and I think it was like, what was it exactly that the civil defense wasn't able to, or the Red Cross wasn't able to get to them because they have to get approval from the Israelis.
Yeah, the Red Cross, everything blurs together because there's so many instances of people under attack. And anyway, this one goes that the Red Cross went and they were able to save her colleague, get her
Yeah,
out of rubble, but then Israel basically struck near them and they were forced to withdraw. And then they were trying to get permission from this mechanism, which is basically an indirect way to negotiate with Israel.
yeah,
That's like with the US at the top. So they were trying to get the permission from the mechanism to go and to get Ahmad Khalil's body, and they weren't able to get that permission. The president, Joseph Aoun, had to personally call and still didn't get the permission. Eventually, that permission was received, and they went and they retrieved her body. She was already killed by then, but no one knew that she had been killed
Mm,
until they did retrieve the body. But yeah, and that one was one that really struck me because of the brutality of it. I didn't know Amal, Allah yarhama, but she was a journalist. I knew her work. And just the fact that they chased them down in the most brutal way. I mean, it wasn't like one airstrike and then a second airstrike and they were killed. It was one airstrike and then maybe a second airstrike on it was the first airstrike was the car in front of them, I think, and then the second airstrike was the car basically near them as they were trying to escape, and then they went into like a pavilion area, and her colleague, والله نسيت اسمها يا الله شو اسمها. Her
Fatima.
colleague her colleague took the difa of the car, the bumper of the car, and tried to like protect them because Ahmad was because the fire was so near them from
Mm,
the airstrike. And Ahmad was burning, and then they like managed to go inside of the house, and Ahmad was crying on her shoulder. Anyway, these are all details that we don't need to go into, I feel. Anyway, and then the last airstrike
yeah,
fell on them, and that
of the
was
house.
like an hour later. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. There's like a chasing down. There's a length of it. It's just I don't know. I At this point, like Israeli propaganda just doesn't factor in. Um, like it's just and it's very annoying then having to sort of argue. I mean, I don't. I just start with this conclusion, like Israel is committing ethnic cleansing, committing genocide in the south of Lebanon, and like, and is targeting journalists and is targeting medical workers systematically. Like, because I mean, we've been here for a minute, and like this is the same army that's, done everything in Gaza. And it's just very scary seeing them replay the same playbook. Um, and with the same monstrosity and veracity and kind of villainous. I don't know. It's very hard to describe in the usual sort of political language, aggressive or something. It's cruelty. Um, I don't know. Where I'm struck at the moment is incredible amounts of anger and frustration and rage of what the Israelis are doing. And then at the same time, the frustration of the current Lebanese government. I do like it's I think a lot of people are confused because it is confusing. Because if you look at the logic of what they're operating on, it makes no sense. And you know, we can't say much about him because it's illegal to criticize the president in Lebanon. But Joseph Aoun did this interview with CNN, and it's just where basically all he does, I think, are like the clips that I saw was talking about Iran, and that it's just all it's and the whole premise of these negotiations between Lebanon and Israel are premised on the idea that the thing they have in common is they both want to dismantle Hezbollah. But that's so ignoring everything that's actually happening. Like, I just cannot believe at the very basis that any of this has to do with dismantling Hezbollah or disarming Hezbollah. And everything we've seen, we've been here, we're seeing it every day, um, does not indicate that at all. Israel's ambitions, what they've been doing in Gaza, what they're doing, I mean, again, for me, one of the logics of it is there's this article that I read that I really kind of go through and analyze in my latest video essay, which is about this idea of neutrality. This is a big thing in Lebanon at the moment that we should be neutral,
Yeah.
but there's not really a kind of description of what does that even mean.
Who does neutrality serve?
Who does it serve, but how do you do it? Like how you literally there's this phrase in this one article where it's like neutrality will be the shield, Lebanon's shield, denying Israel a square foot of our geography. Why? Why? And one example that I give as well in the video is that like Syria today under the Shara administration is operating from a place of neutrality, but vis-a-vis Israel. But that still did not stop Israel from occupying more Syrian land, from attacking Damascus, from funding El Hejri in Suwaida and fomenting civil strife with, it's just it's delusional, and I can only imagine. I mean, I obviously talk to friends and family back home, but I haven't lived there for like 5 years. And I don't know, it's just like I can imagine it's just so messy. It just all feels so amorphous and like surreal and Kafkaesque. Like seeing what's happening and then seeing the president say
It
this or
is, yeah.
Nawaf Salam say that, or then the discourse, or then Al Jadid, one of the biggest channels, what are they covering? Sex workers in Dodo. Like, as though no one's ever heard of that, but also that this is a priority or whatever. Or then, like, I don't know, it messes me up sometimes trying to, like, stay clocked in with Lebanon.
Yeah. All right. So you talked about a few things there, and I think they're all tied with each other. But let me start with you were talking about like Israel's brutality. I think what's scary about Israel's cruelty and brutality and their direct targeting of paramedics and journalists and civilians and displacing and ethnically cleansing hundreds of thousands from their homes is what's scary about it is just how much they can get away with it. They got away with it in Gaza. Before that, they got away with it in the West Bank. They got away with it in the Nakba. And now they're getting away with it even amongst certain parts of Lebanon's constituency and its political class. It's like they don't want to believe that Lebanon could be part of this mix. Like, no, Lebanon is separate. Lebanon is not Gaza. We're not Gaza. Surely not us. We're not Hezbollah supporters. Um, we're not with Hamas. It's not us. They don't want us. And I don't know. Uh, It's like this disbelief. It's this refusal to understand that Israel is brutal. It is not taking into consideration the humanity of the people in the Middle East, its neighboring countries that are surrounding it. Um,
Or international law.
yeah, no, forget about international law. Why even talk
Hushi,
about
yeah.
it? What is international law? Yeah, or international law. Um, Even okay, so I did a BBC radio interview just to bring back, sorry to bring it back to Amal Khalil, but I did one the day after she was killed, and they were basically talking about Israel's targeting of journalists. So every time it was me, my colleague Nada who is also my writing partner very often, and also Karim Shaib from the AP. And every time we made a point, they would do this thing where they would be like, well, and Israel says that it is targeting just ambulances because Hezbollah puts weapons in
I
its
remember this. I remember this interview.
they ended up cutting a significant part of the interview that I thought made a lot of sense because at the very end, I was like, you keep saying Israel said this and Israel said that, but we're journalists on the ground and we are telling you there has been no evidence of, for example, weapons being carried in ambulances, of, for example, that there were any quote unquote terrorist elements in the vehicle with Amal Khalid or anything like that. I mean, we're on the ground and we're telling you, and the reason that we do these programs, the reason that we're on the ground is because we're trying to make people understand it's our job to report what's happening. It's to make people understand what's happening. So when you are just repeating statements without thinking critically, what does that serve? It essentially just negates everything that we just did. Um, Anyway, it was something like that, but they ended up cutting it out. They cut out quite a few bits. We went even like really deep into kind of how brutal the targeting of paramedics was, all this stuff that had just been scrubbed. And I thought that it was just a very whitewashed interview in the
Yeah.
end. It kind of pissed me off. It pissed me off a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so, but when it comes to Lebanon's political class, its only legitimacy is that it's the political class, right? It's kind of forced to operate within the confines of its political existence within the international context. Um, and I don't envy its position. I don't envy the position of the prime minister or the president
Yeah.
who are forced to do these things. But at the same time, I mean, I do feel as though in many ways they're kind of falling into the trap that's been set out for it. Israel is insistent that it wants to disarm Hezbollah. We all know it's not about disarming Hezbollah. What Israel wants to avoid on October 7, it lives in terror that any neighboring countries are going to invade it in the same way that happened with Hamas and Gaza. And that goes back to the fact of the matter, which is that Israel exists in a place that is didn't make any sense for it to establish itself in. Um, but I think that knowledge is what keeps them fueled. And after October 7, it wasn't about disarmament. It was about just the sheer and pure eradication of anything that could be a threat, which is why you hear Israeli soldiers often saying, even children are Hamas, even children are Hezbollah, because the children of today are tomorrow's Hezbollah, they're tomorrow's Hamas. It's not about the disarmament, it's about like purely eradicating that threat. And as long as that is going to exist, as long as there are people living in the South, there's also going to be the sense of resistance, whether that's Hezbollah or not. It's always going to exist. There's going to be resentment against the fact that there's an occupying power or power that is conducting ethnic cleansing and so on. That resentment is going to continue to take hold. But you feel like in Lebanon, there's two different Lebanons. There's South Lebanon, and then there's the rest of Lebanon. And the rest of Lebanon is just like, we have nothing to do with this. That's not us. And that's the problem, that this is the Lebanon, the sovereigntist Lebanon that keeps talking about we need to be a sovereign state, we need to be a sovereign state, but it's saying this while also neglecting a large part of the population. And that neglect isn't necessarily intentional. The government doesn't have the capacity to house hundreds of thousands of refugees. It opened up the schools, NGOs are helping. It's turning into a long-term displacement crisis. I mean, Lord knows they're not in an easy position, but at the same time, when they're agreeing to ceasefires that are absolute mockeries,
Yeah.
it's not even worth call. In my reporting, it's very difficult for me to even say there's a ceasefire
Yeah.
because technically, legally, there is, but it's not a ceasefire. Um, but you have to say it.
Mm.
So you have to go into this whole spiel and explain why it's not. Anyway, so there's this ceasefire. At the same time, they have to be the ones to disarm Hezbollah because it should be a domestic legal matter, which it totally is. If Hezbollah is going to be disarmed, it's very much a Lebanese issue. It's not an Israeli issue. It doesn't change the fact that the Israelis are occupying South Lebanon. They're advancing into South Lebanon. They're continuing to conduct airstrikes. They're continuing to kill civilians. And in this moment in time, it sure as hell seems as if the Lebanese government and Israel are on the same side, even if they're not.
Mm.
It just feels like the Lebanese government is kind of falling into this trap that it never really had any choice to not fall into.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at the moment there's I don't know if I should be pushing back on a certain narrative that like anytime I talk about my criticism of the Lebanese government and their actions and calling them out, that they're only operating from a place of like enacting an Israeli-American agenda in Lebanon. Um, that like, and this is the reason that I thought it was important in the last video I say to like go through the history of, what a lot of people call the Lebanese entity, you
Mhm.
know, and the Lebanese political class and how the state was formed, which was in its foundation, um, like Mount Lebanon and Beirut centric, and all these other regions were peripheral. And we've seen over the history of the last 70 years that the South is considered like a periphery, and that, yeah, they didn't actually have any representation within the sectarian political system. Again, here we're talking about Shia. The position they were given with this kind of like sectarian division of power, the Speaker of Parliament, was a symbolic thing until then, like the Civil War, and um, there were certain Shia political parties that were able to like get a seat at the table. But up until then, the Shia and the South were completely neglected, and um, there's a lot of history there, and I do a deep thing in the video, but there is definitely this problem, yeah, with especially this discourse of sovereignty, where it's very clearly not sovereignty. That like when they talk about the ceasefire, it's very clearly a ceasefire for Beirut and for Mount Lebanon, even though the Israelis will still violate that, as they did today. But again, like you said, like this is the exact same thing. That no, they didn't bomb Beirut, they bombed Dahir, you know? Or they didn't, Israel isn't occupying Lebanon, it's occupying South Lebanon. That I think even in that language, there's this constant separation or attempt to separate. And again, a lot of these people who like employ this language really also talk about like federalism or even secession or like cutting Lebanon into parts, which is kind of like a final attempt to fix the problems of sectarianism of the country. Even though it's not a solution at all, but it's like, we should all create our own ethno states that are like, 50 miles squared. Um, but I find that very frustrating. And again, I see that parallel with that distancing with Palestine. One thing I tried to do in the video, again, historically, is I'm very frustrated whenever I read a history of Lebanon that separates it from Palestine.
Mhm.
That has like it's a unique formation that is essentially separate from the region that you can understand separate from the region, and it there are factors, but Lebanon has its own thing and these elites and these whatever. Because you can't understand, especially Lebanon today, without understanding Palestine, without understanding Zionism, like the effects on the region as a whole of the Nakba, and then like the Israelis' attempts since then. You know, Ben Gurion famously called like towards the end of the 48, the formation of the state, they call it a regret that they didn't capture the entirety of what they call Judea, Sumeria, Judea, and they fixed that mistake in 67. But of course, like there's so many implications or like ramifications of creating this European fortress, this military, like, bastion of Western civilization, as they say in the Levant, of
Mhm.
expelling these hundreds of thousands of people into these neighboring states, then like that all have a very close relation. But regardless, and that basically what I did in the last video is really try to situate Lebanon within essentially Israel's regional ambitions over the last 70 years. Ambitions, but also reactions. Because again, October 7 was a reaction to decades of brutality, of siege, of humiliation, of violence, of
Exactly.
literally, yeah, what I mean, I say this in the video, what the Israelis used to call mowing the lawn. Every few years, go into Gaza, bomb the shit out of it, destroy parts of its infrastructure, kill thousands, and then ceasefire. And then go back 2 years later. And now, after October 7, I think there's this calibration in their head where it's like, okay, that strategy of just mowing the lawn, of like managing the occupation, managing the stuff, um, isn't going to work. So we need to go the next step further. And so like you said, are raising the lawn, paving over it. And that's
Mhm.
what we've seen in the areas they've captured of Gaza. That's what we've seen of Gaza as a whole. Like
Yeah.
90% of the buildings and everything, and even the ones that are still standing are like whatever. And they're doing that in Lebanon.
Well, over 50% of Gaza is still occupied. Netanyahu's saying he wants to take it up to 70%. When is it going to be 90% and 100%? And
Yeah.
listen, if I was Israel, la samah Allah, if I was
بعيد
Israel,
الشر.
yeah, بعيد الشر. If I was Israel and I was an oasis, as they call it, of Western civilization with a bunch of hostile countries around me, um, I know that my only solution is either to make peace with those countries, which is not happening. Maybe it is. I don't know. Who knows what Lebanon's going to do now? Or fully fucking eradicate them.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and peace means having authoritarian dictatorships that are clamped down on their populations, a la Sisi in Egypt or the Jordanian monarchy or the Gulf.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, or even in Syria where there is no Hezbollah and no Hamas, and for some reason they're still occupying over 600 kilometers squared of Syrian territory and do demolitions and home raids and incursions like on a constant basis. And Syria has expressed nothing but, I mean, if not peace, but definitely non-hostility.
I let the Syrian, like, shut down, and the administration haven't said anything. But, like, for Israel, it's like there's a potential of the population, that there's like, and so that's why, yeah, it's just like they want to rule over a region of ruin, that there's
Hmm.
not even a possibility of anything even possibly happening. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, then you still have people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir saying we should assassinate al-Shaddai, or
Yeah.
that Turkey is next, or
Yeah.
or like on it, like I really appreciate you saying at the beginning. Oh yeah, go on.
Oh no, I'm saying Israel isn't, I mean, it's the fact that Israel will not have any peace in its current form anytime soon. That's not like a threat, it's a fact. It's not doing itself any
Yeah,
favors. It didn't do itself any favors by establishing itself in the first place.
but that's the thing, and that's what's very difficult to sort of just discuss as a history, or like then think about potentials moving forward. I think a lot of people are just very, I mean, burnt out. How do I say this? There's definitely a lack of imagination in Lebanon. And I'm not saying that it's so easy to have an imagination, but because we are backed into so many, like into a multi-corner, you know, not just through Israel, but again, I use the term poly-crisis because we are still in Lebanon. I'm sorry, Lebanon is still, and people in Lebanon are still experiencing. yeah, the worst economic collapse in like human history over the last 100 years, globally. Not human history, but globally speaking, the World Bank, said that it's like the worst in a century, globally speaking. And on top of that, all this destruction. Again, I think about the fact that a week before this recent escalation of the war on March 2nd, that there were buildings collapsing in the north of Lebanon and Tripoli
Yeah.
yeah. And that's not just like a fact of nature, that's a part of the class war, because this is also the same city that the richest Lebanese comes from, who
Mhm.
was the prime minister, Najib Mikati. Um, and yeah, the fact that they stole all our money and that, like, I don't know, it's very difficult to hold all the pieces together of Lebanon. And then, even worse, to then imagine an alternative.
Yeah, it's not a functioning state. It hasn't been a functioning state ever, probably. And then on top of that, you have this constant push and pull between foreign powers that have been fighting over Lebanon for such a long time. You have literally people, politicians, political parties in Lebanon that would have no problem with peace with Israel.
Mm,
Um, man, I'm out there in the South sometimes. I go to Christian villages and I talk to people about how they feel about the occupation. And this is not everyone. This is very much like certain people, but certain people tell me, we have no problem. We're looking forward to them coming. They're going to help us. They're going to give us job opportunities. It was, they implied that it was great under the days of the Southern Lebanese army. I mean, there's people that are actively hoping for those days. I asked one guy, he said, they call us traitors because we didn't leave South Lebanon because we're Lebanese. We want to stay because we're Lebanese, and it's true. And you should stay if you can stay. That's within any Lebanese person's right. They should be fighting to stay. But I asked him, like, what does it mean? What does Lebanon mean to you if you get to stay, but all of the Shia villages around you have been completely erased? And he was just like, so what? Because to him, that's not
mhm,
Lebanon. They want to form Lebanon in their own way. It's
mm,
like this kind of Lebanon of intolerance. And it's not only on that side, it's on every side. I mean, you see the stupidity also of Hezbollah's constituency during protests, like going Shia, Shia, Shia. And yeah, it's there's stupidity on all sides. And that's the problem, is this constant push and pull of, first of all, the sectarian tensions, but they're being very much leveraged and instigated by this East versus West
mm,
fighting that's always been happening in it.
yeah. No, and that's why again, sorry to keep harking back about my last video, but I mean, I did spend like a month, 2 months reading and while seeing everything happening, but like it was my attempt at doing something, my own intervention. But
Mhm.
anyway, I think this is precisely why that in the 70s, the Lebanese national movement um, was very anti-sectarian. I mean, part of the point was we need to form a new Lebanese national movement. Sorry, I just said the word again, as in one that is not based on sectarianism, but on, citizenship under a state, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and that it was multinational in itself. It was headed, one of the main heads was Kamal Jumblat, the Druze leader, but, and allied obviously with the PLO, and a lot of like socialist currents. Like it's a lot of the stuff that also factors in the fact that when we're talking about the South, we're also talking about like class, or like when we're talking about Shia. Like, and one of the only people that I've seen Lebanese like thinkers sum this up as Mehdi Amil, like connecting the downtrodden sects as he calls them,
Mm.
um and so, and then also it's the fact that if I'm not mistaken, like a large portion of the membership of the Lebanese Communist Party in the 60s and 70s were Shia,
Hmm.
because they could see that there was this system that completely excluded them, and so the response at the time was, okay, so we should abolish that system.
A large part of the Lebanese Communist Party is now in Hezbollah.
Yeah, I mean that has a whole,
I know, I know.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
it just means like, yeah.
But exactly, so like, and that's what happened with a lot of these leftist movements, like in groups. Um, there's a lot of details of the Civil War of why this happened, especially with the Syrian invasion in '76. And basically, if you wanted to keep operating, you had to, you know, be allegiant to Hafiz al-Assad, even if 5 years earlier you were like super critical, because you're a Marxist. But essentially what happened with like the formation of the Amal movement and then with Hezbollah is that like it became like, okay, we're not going to try to dismantle the sectarian system, but get our own seat on the table, you know? And there again, it feels very difficult in this present moment with all our criticism of Hezbollah and Amal, which no one ever talks about because there's so much more to say,
Yeah.
um, is that no one else is offering Shia people representation. That there's this dismissal when Joseph Aoun or anyone else, when they talk about the South or when they talk about that there's this complete dismissal of their struggle against Israel, but their struggle also against the bullshit neoliberal capitalist system that is Lebanon. Um, and so,
What's different now? I mean, now they're also very much intertwined with the bullshit neoliberal
oh
capitalist
yeah,
system.
yeah, yeah.
I think there's
No, I'm
plenty.
not.
Yeah.
I don't mean representation as in they're like fighting for them at every level, but at least, but
Yeah.
like they capture a lot of that space. And part of the problem is that without a kind of literal national unity movement or whatever, when you have people that are basically only talking about Lebanon and meaning the North or like not the South, that there's no one contesting that space at a human dignified level. I don't know. I just saw this magazine called This Is Beirut, which I've seen them post really terrible stuff,
Uh,
but they have a section called Shia politics,
mm.
and it's functionally anti-Shia politics. Like it's,
They've
or
had
then
literally
yeah,
Israelis interviewed.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I got into a thing on Blue Sky, but
Mm.
anyway, yeah. Or then like LBC, one of the biggest broadcasters in Lebanon, adding to the surrealness of all this. But you saw this, the Angry Birds video.
Remind me, there's so many things. This is it's like got a
LBC
bell in my head. Yeah.
published a AI generated video of Angry Birds, but they're Hezbollah.
Oh yeah.
And there's a
Yeah.
caricature of Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hezbollah. And it was just very racist and very anti whatever. And they were forced to take it down, I think, by like a public auditor or whatever,
Yeah.
where they're like, this violates the anti-sectarian law or whatever, like sectarian hatred kind of stuff. And then a week or two later, they post it back again. And they're like, we're standing for freedom of speech. And the very idea of the potential of there being a civil war in Lebanon, and part of the creation of that civil war being an AI generated Angry Birds video. I can't stand this reality. I just can't.
I know.
And yeah. Or then you've seen the other ones. I remember when I was in Beirut last, like I would get these like YouTube advertisements that are AI generated of Joseph Aoun on a tractor rolling over Hezbollah's weapons, or yeah, Lego people like putting down their arms and like absurd.
Yeah, AI stuff has been a really interesting component of this war and also the US-Iran war.
Yes, and we're clearly trying to do that, but for us it ends up being cringe.
Yeah,
But
yeah, Lebanon's not good at it.
no, because it's still older people seeing it and doing it. But like, I think someone described this, and I thought it was a very accurate description, probably of what's happening is that a lot of people have been killed, like leadership in Iran. Like we know this, but a
Mm.
part of it is also like PR or like propaganda. And so you probably have like Gen Zers now. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah, of course.
operating these things, and they're plugged in
Yeah.
because like aside from everything, they're winning that PR war. Like they're ripping it with some of these videos, like some of these mockery videos where it's like very clearly targeting Americans
Hmm.
and like completely just, yeah, ripping it.
Yeah, it's
Like some
amazing.
of this, yeah, it's like fire.
I need to make a playlist, honestly.
But okay, I don't know how long we've been going, but I think we can sort of wrap up. Um, there's so many things we can talk about. But ultimately, I do worry sometimes when I talk about Lebanon that I overwhelm people,
Mm.
or that it's always overwhelming because, again, like we can't really talk about Lebanon at the moment separate from Iran and the Iran war. Um, Israel's ambitions in the region connect us all, you know? And so we
Mhm.
can't, it's often difficult just to talk about Lebanon without then talking about Syria, talking about the Arab region, talking about Trump and the US, talking about Or
Problem
then,
with Lebanon is it thinks it's so separate. You know, I actually I always bring this up. I read in grad school he's an academic paper by anthropologist Ghassan Haj.
Hassan Hajj, yeah.
Yeah, and it was about basically Lebanese people in Australia. Typically, Maronite Lebanese that immigrate from Lebanon to Australia, they think of themselves as white. They're like, you know, at the top of the class, political, socioeconomic spectrum in Lebanon. And they go to Australia expecting to maintain that trajectory, only to be treated as immigrants, as brown people, as less than.
I've read this, yes.
Yeah. And it's the first time they ever experienced that. It's their first time ever realizing, like, oh shit, I'm Arab.
Yeah.
Um,
And for a lot of them, then they double down, like this politician who, like, I
mhm.
punch any bloke in the face that says I'm Lebanese or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It can go in both directions, either reconnect with being Arab or you just completely try to fight that. But I also feel like this is what happens in Lebanon during this conflict, during this war, is this like disconnect with the identity where they're like, no, no. We're not those kinds of Lebanese. We're the sovereigntist Lebanese, or we're not this kind of Lebanese. We're the resistance Lebanese. We're not like the traitorous Lebanese, and so on. And there's not any kind of unified national identity because Lebanon's just never been allowed to have one. And it's silly now to be negotiating with Israel in the US, having them broker these talks. Um, for potentially down the line peace, but now a quote unquote ceasefire. And when you know that this is one of the very reasons that your state is so weak,
Yeah.
this is not a country. The US is not a country. And Israel certainly is not an entity that will ever allow you to have any sort of strength or defensive capability.
And again, like we've seen, I mean, they have targeted Lebanese soldiers in the army, Lebanese officers, just like yesterday or 2 days ago. And
A brigadier general was killed. They were
yeah,
targeted.
yeah,
They were targeted. And this is at a time when there's a ceasefire in place where the Lebanese army is meant to be establishing these quote unquote pilot zones where they're going in to take control of areas of the south to disarm Hezbollah. And yet they were targeted. And I was reading an analysis that maybe this was an attempt to like kind of cull the ranks of the Lebanese army that are more pro-Hezbollah. But that's scary as well.
it's very exactly because
Yeah.
there's constantly the line is pushed to what is an acceptable target,
Eh,
and how many steps removed are acceptable, you know? Because again, all of this really starts to me like this. Like obviously, it started on October 8th. I mean, it started in 1948, but like the Pagers attack, the Pagers massacre, that was just a new form of terrorism, of cruelty, of violence, of just it's still not processed. I still don't understand what that means, you know? But
mhm.
um,
2 days in a row.
yeah,
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing, and I've been tough on the sovereignist camp, but not
yeah,
to say that the Iran and pro-resistance camp, or I don't want to call them pro-resistance because right now they are
yeah,
resistant,
yeah.
but the pro-Iran camp is also doing the right thing. I mean, the answer for Lebanon is not to have a state within a state that represents predominantly one sect of the population that then fuels resentment with the other sects in the population. Um, but but there's some people that are exercising so much critique towards them right now for having entered the war in the first place. And I don't know how useful it is when you actively have a military occupation on your land, when your civilians are dying, when your family and friends and colleagues and classmates are displaced. It's not useful. Yeah, the anger is maybe keep it, whatever, store it away, do something about it. It's a thing for you to do with Lebanon later, but right now there is a foreign occupation, and I mean that's how I look at it. And I also think, everyone kind of looks at it as if Hezbollah was avenging Khamenei's death, but they were also responding to 15 months of
Yeah, yeah,
ceasefire violations where Israel was striking every single day,
yeah.
and they were holding on to Lebanese land. And الدولة اللبنانية ما كانت سائلة.
No,
It was as if
no,
it wasn't happening. The rest of
yeah.
Lebanon wasn't asking. It didn't matter. And there was no reconstruction happening. People weren't able to return to their homes. on the border, and it's as if, خلاص, they just wrote it off as part of Lebanon. That's it. And it's a problem.
Yeah.
And
And
that's Lebanon's
they
problem.
had no, that's Lebanon's problem. They had no plan for it as well, or like how to whatever, except for continuing with this doomed ceasefire, which again was nothing but a ceasefire. No, I agree with 100% of everything you're saying. And that's my position at the moment, even though I have been very critical, and I am still, because again, like we're saying, like there's not, like the part of the critique of Hezbollah internally in Lebanon is that it is a sectarian force and political party, like within the country,
And they're
that,
fascists.
and how?
And they're fascists. They're a fascist political sectarian force in the
Yeah,
country that's operating with disregard, total disregard for the state.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem for Lebanon. That's not a problem for Israel.
Yes, yes, yes. This is also an important point that like people don't allow me space for, or allow a lot of us in Lebanon space for, where it's like if you're saying anything, you're instantly. This is the problem with campism. If you're saying any critique, like who else is criticizing Hezbollah? Well, not just criticizing, like attacking it's Israel. So like, but no, but we can't erase history. We can't ignore our own eyes. We can't ignore the fact that last time during the elections, I mean, Hezbollah allied with the Lebanese forces. You know what I mean? Like in the municipal elections in Beirut, it's a
Like,
sectarian party that has its own thing. At the moment, it isn't a priority for me to talk about them or to critique or whatever because, yeah, there is an occupation at the moment, and it's just
I mean, yeah,
at
they
the
brought us here, but yeah, there's an occupation.
and even that they've had a part in it for sure. But again, the thing that I'm being like trying to examine closer is that they like gave the excuse or whatever,
Yeah,
but that seeing the long haul of Israel's ambitions, um,
100%.
it's a big part of the reason I left Lebanon. Like I say this in the video, is that I saw this war coming. Like any one of us that's who were seeing, like this was 2020. I mean, we still had jets overhead, or like that was the thing, like they were present, but it was just like, push is going to come to shove. Um, Eventually the threats won't just be empty threats. Um,
I think the scary war is the civil war, which
yes, this,
is increasingly becoming, I hope I'm wrong, but inevitable.
especially if this government keeps going on this track where the only
Yeah.
thing they'll be doing, trying to save some semblance of Lebanon, even though it'll be like a completely fractured, basically just Beirut to Mount Lebanon and the north or something. Even that's already kind of erased in a different sense because of the economic collapse and the neglect of the north. Um, but yeah, there's no assurance that Israel will stop where it says it's going to stop.
But if they don't take part in this diplomatic theater, they'll be seen as having sided with Hezbollah, and then that would be a surefire elimination for the entirety of the country. So I guess
Well,
they're trying to preserve what they can. I mean, God,
yeah,
I don't know.
no, I am very worried all the time. Um, and I just don't see a way out of this. Like I don't know. I do know a lot of people try to end certain conversations like this with some positive note, but I like, and I'd be lying to myself and lying to everybody to be like, but there is a strength or whatever, and there is a thing of unity in Lebanon, and it's like, no, yeah,
I'm not Lebanese, by the way, readers. I apologize if I keep saying we.
no, I mean, but yeah, you've
To,
lived there long enough. I don't know, but I don't know. There is also a thing of like, no one can become Lebanese, which I don't agree with. I don't like this, where
yeah.
like blood, like you may have lived there for whatever, and you may have experienced this and whatever, and you can say we, but it's aslik, usulik, Suri.
Yeah, I will say I'm very Lebanese in my experiences for the
Yes,
last 10 years.
yeah, no, you've experienced and been through, my God. Yeah, I mean, the last episode we did a couple of years ago was like entitled like the last 5 years have been messed up or whatever, because
Yeah.
like from 2019 to 2020 and to
I feel like I just keep narrowly escaping death in this country.
yeah, that's that's the thing actually, because you remind me just now of another conversation I had with um Lina Munzir,
Mm.
who's also now living, she's back in Lebanon or has been, I don't know about right now, where she said she can be there during a time of war with Israel, but she doesn't think she can stay there if there's a civil war.
Mm.
Like it'll be too ugly for her, it'll be too painful.
Yeah.
And that feels really real. And she also said that she thinks that there is something now that can be described as a Lebanese, something that connects us all across the country is a shared trauma and a shared, experience of whatever. But now with the displacements and whatever, it creates, you know, new traumas that not everyone is experiencing.
100%.
One person's trauma is another person's annoyance. Because look at these people now, smoking ergile on the streets, making Beirut look so ugly.
I know. Meanwhile, the Israelis, they party like us and they dance like us. It makes me feel
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
good.
Taib Nada, I love this conversation. I really do miss you. I really want to thank you for the work you're doing. And I know it's difficult, and I know you know this, but there are many of us like me watching um, and seeing the things you're doing and are, I don't know, very proud of you. Is that a weird thing to say?
Thank you.
Is that, sorry, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but because it sounds like I'm some uncle.
No, it's really sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, this is the time for, if you're going to be a journalist in Lebanon, this is the time for you to put all of your time and effort. Otherwise, what the hell is it for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
يعطيك العافية.
Allah يعافيك. انت يعطيك العافية on all the videos that you're doing. I love the stuff that you're doing.
Thank you. I I'm happy with it too. I just, in a week it's gonna be a year I've been doing these videos.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. And I've made like five or six that I'm like, bish. I know how.
You've gotten me into some stuff also. Like I would watch them all the way through and I'm like, I always learned something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do try to do this thing where it's like I'm talking to a foreign audience, but also to a Lebanese audience, where it's like this is stuff still, because my priority is, yeah, priority is both ways. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you want to plug actually? Do you want or like your Instagram or something? Where can people follow you? Or should I just put it in the show notes?
Nothing specific. Ahla wa sahla. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm here in Beirut in real life. Come have a
Okay.
coffee whenever you want to.
طيب. يلا. This was lovely.
It was really good to
Yeah.
talk to you.
Take
Yalla.
care.